British airline Flybe has ceased trading and all scheduled flights have been cancelled. The UK Civil Aviation Authority made the announcement and urged those with booked Flybe flights not to travel to airports. CAA Consumer Director Paul Smith said it's always sad to see an airline enter administration, and we know that Flybe's decisions to stop trading will be stressing for all of its employees and customers. Breach has been affected by this. Breach, good morning to you.
Good morning, Greg. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm all right, Breach. What had you planned, and what plans were scuppered?
Well, I am going to East Midlands on the 25th of February. It was for an airline training event. So I had booked last Tuesday. Didn't book to say last Tuesday evening. And then I woke up on Saturday morning and someone was telling me the whole thing was kaboom, gone. And my flights, they weren't cheap, Greg, to be honest. They were €270 for a return flight to Belfast.
Yeah.
So I just was a bit, I suppose, peeved, disappointed, whatever. You can't even plan ahead now at all. It's crazy.
Yeah, and no word on refunds yet. I'd imagine if they've gone kaboom, as you say, they probably don't have the resources to pay. We'll try and find some of that information out, though. You're maybe looking for a payback into your card. That's one option. I don't know how successful that might be and how quickly that might happen.
You know what? I'm kind of annoyed at the fact that obviously they took my money last Tuesday and they knew they were going to go kaboom, as I said. But could they not just reschedule flights? I don't mind how I get, as long as I get, or get my money back.
Yeah.
I do still want to travel, obviously. You don't book something and I won. Yeah. So that's what I'm hoping for. I've been on to the bank, but I haven't had any come back there yet because I paid through my debit card. So hopefully I can get it back. I have to see them today.
Yeah, and as you say, it's a significant amount of money, isn't it?
Yeah, it's €300 gone just if I don't get refunded.
I don't know if travel insurance, and we'll find out. Eoghan Corry, maybe Eoghan can hear me now. Eoghan, are you there?
I am indeed listening to that story.
Yeah.
It's another very, very sad story from the aviation, Greg.
I was just going to make a point, but you're there and you can answer straight away. It's probably not the case, the point in Breach's case, but if you had travel insurance, does travel insurance cover an airline collapse?
Oddly enough, travel insurance tends not to cover an airline collapse because in the old days, the airlines didn't collapse because they were all government funded. Now, every travel insurance varies from policy to policy. What we've had in about 10 years, for about €90 or €100, you'll get an annual policy. Nobody looks at it. It comes with about 20 minutes of reading with all your clauses. But most of those, in my experience, don't cover an airline collapse. Now, they have, you can buy an extra onto a lot of them. That for about €6 to cover an airline collapse. But that's not really any good because nobody only looks at it, Greg, until the airline has collapsed and they say, exactly. Oh yeah, you managed to get out of this, guys. There is another way back for Breed, and she will get her money back. The two ways back are the credit card charge. Get your charge back, let the credit card company know and get it back quickly. And if that doesn't work, the equivalent of the Aviation Commissioner in England is the CAA, and they will refund everybody. There is a sort of a cover fund, €1 per every flight that goes into a central pot, and it covers collapses like this. The real problem, and Bridges just alluded to it there, is you really don't want the hassle. You don't want to be looking to another airline to pay sometimes a higher price than was the original and going through all that rigmarole. You just want to be told, here's your new flight time. That's not an option, unfortunately. What happened with Flybe is, and they took bookings right up till midnight on Friday, and at 3 a.m. they started sending out emails saying, sorry.
Well, before we get to that story, because I want to let Breach go, how does one apply for a refund through the CAA?
Website, very clear-cut, very straightforward. Be very, very careful. When you Google and you say flight refunds, Flybe collapse, you're going to get all of these sites popping up saying, oh, we'll get your money back for you. And they all charge you. It's free. Go straight to the caa.co.uk site and go straight to them. One of the problems with the internet is that Google. If you pay Google money, you'll land top of the page, and there's no shortage of chancers and white.
And we've seen this before when people are applying for visas for America and such. So caa.co.uk, Breach.
For free, we'll charge you. It's shocking stuff. Yeah.
All right, great stuff, Breach. I'll let you go. Busy house, I would say. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right,
I'll let you know how I get on.
Please do, Breach. God bless you. All right, and good luck with the training, of course. Right, okay. Sorry about that, Owen, dipping in and out. So you were about to tell us how this came to pass then, because Flybe were taking bookings right up to the last. How could they have? What is the tipping point? There must be a real cliff edge with some of these airlines then.
Usually it's a payment that comes in. They have a payment to make. They failed to make it. Flybe didn't own very many of their aircraft. 6 of them were leased out of a company in Shannon Airport and 1 out in Dublin. And they operated a series of Dash 4s. So what they were doing behind the scenes of Friday, this only emerged afterwards, was scrambling for finance. They were running out of cash. They knew they wouldn't be able to continue operating on Saturday. They didn't raise the money that they needed. And the tragedy here is that Flybe failed before. They failed in March 2020. US hedge funds bought the brand for a small amount of money, big to you and me, but a small in aviation.
They bought the name, really, did they?
They bought the name and all the problems for about £2 million sterling. And they then did something very fascinating and reckless, in my opinion, in that they started operating routes which were competing with other airlines. And they put an awful lot of connectivity into linking regional airports into Heathrow. Heathrow is a horribly expensive place to fly in and out of. Your passenger charges before you even start charging the fare are £30 sterling. So they were operating expensive aircraft on expensive routes in competition with other airlines. And it didn't seem to be a model that made a hell of a lot of sense. They then started chopping and changing at short notice. So it was a series of almost crisis management. And you would have thought, if you're coming into a new company, whatever about operating an airline that's run into trouble, if you're buying an airline, you would have worked out a pretty strong strategy to get through it. Now, they also bought in during COVID. They knew the problems of COVID, but nobody expected COVID to disrupt things for so long. And that is another factor that brought them down. But you have to ask yourself, when you go into the aviation game and you haven't got it worked out, it's a very competitive business. And an aviation failure is big news because of the amount of disruption it causes and the havoc it causes for customers. It also causes havoc for Belfast City Airport, who've lost 1/3 of their business in one fell swoop.
Yeah, it's a big hit. So all customers that were due to fly with them, caa.co.uk, that's the place to go and to seek a refund there. I mean, when you have the options, your credit or debit card provider, or whether or not you have this perhaps bells and whistles insurance that might cover you, or the CAA refund, how do you choose which is the best offer there?
First stop is credit card.
Okay.
If the credit card gets back to you straight away, the others are a bit longer and a bit messier. The credit card will be looking to the CAA for you to get their money back. But if it's a recent enough purchase, you can generally catch it on your credit card.
Right, okay. This all comes, it's the flip side of the aviation industry. Ryanair, they've posted its largest after-tax profits for the October to December quarter and said bookings for Easter and summer flights in recent weeks were very, very robust. I mean, they're trying to get in new planes to cover the kind of passenger numbers they'll be shifting around the place. I mean, the strategy they employed, people can be quite critical from Ryanair at times, but they kept their business at a point during the pandemic that gave them amazing springboard when things opened up, and now they're reaping the benefits here.
You got it there, Greg. They kept their pilots licensed. They kept their aircraft certified. They didn't have to store them and then send them back in to go through that expensive process. And they kept their cabin crew employed. Now, that meant when they came back last summer, they roared back into the sky. To give you an example of where they fit in the European Champions League, in 2019, it was pretty much touch and go between the Lufthansa group, not Lufthansa, but the entire group. That includes Swiss, includes Brussels, includes Austrian, which would be the biggest airline in Europe, Ryanair or Lufthansa. There'd be a couple of million between them, but our Ryanair were just that nose ahead. It looks, when the figures, Ryanair released their figures for last year, 130 million passengers. When Lufthansa and the third place, Turkish Airlines, released their figures, Ryanair could actually be as big as the two of them combined. They're streaking ahead in passenger numbers because of that strategy. The profit is about 1/3 of the winter of pre-COVID, so they haven't got back to making the money back. And remember, you got to remember, they lost about €2 billion. They had €2 billion to lose. Otherwise, they'd be where Flybe is now. But they lost about €2 billion through the pandemic. So they're edging that profit back. Interesting thing from those figures that you quoted this morning, the revenue per passenger is about €60 per passenger, which is a very good
modest,
return.
isn't it? Yeah, I mean, like
average,
yeah.
Our average fare is about €40 of that. So we're seeing a situation where Ryanair's fares are only about 2/3 of what their revenue per passenger is, because so many people are buying priority boarding and the cup of coffee and the extra bag.
I still don't understand why people do the priority boarding, but anyway, they're clever enough to package it. And the price they've gone up, I think it's around 14%. This increase turnover is primarily because they're getting the bums on the actual seats. When you consider also that, the increasing fuel costs and everything else, I think it really is quite a remarkable business story, but one we've come to expect from that company, I suppose, to some extent. I don't want to sound like I'm praising them too much, but I think, that kind of success in this kind of environment needs to be celebrated, I think.
Well, the fares went up 14%. The average across the industry last year was 40%. So anyone looking at their Lanzarote flights or Christmas will have seen exactly what happened with fares. They're flying up. The fuel situation is also very remarkable. Michael O'Leary, as you know, is not unknown to have his elbow on the fence at race course tracks around, and he's a bit of a gambler, but he gambled very heavily on fuel going up. So he hedged 80% of his fuel for last year at a lower cost, and he's hedged 60% of this year's at whatever price he could buy. When you do that, you're gambling that the price will go up, not down. As everyone knows listening, price spiked in fuel the first 6 months immediately after the war broke out this time last year, and Ryanair ended up paying an awful lot less than the likes of Flybe, who couldn't hedge because they were a new airline and didn't have the buying power that they did.
Yeah. And finally, Ryanair offering hope to some of the Flybe staff. I think they've around about 250 staff pilots. Obviously, they'll have no issue there in getting work if they want to.
Belfast was their biggest base. It's like 150, nearly 200 people in Belfast. It's a shocking employment story as well. Let's
right. So it's not quite as it might require a relocation for Flybe staff to avail of any Ryanair offers then.
Well, Ryanair have put in rescue flights for the passengers, and they're having a recruitment day, I think, tomorrow for Flybe staff.
So Ryanair do fly out of Belfast. I get confused here because there was some squabble over airports, but Ryanair do fly out of one particular Belfast airport, isn't it? Belfast City Airport, isn't it?
It's Belfast International. Aer Lingus fly out of Belfast City. But you're right, okay.
I was half right somewhere or other. That's why I've sat nav, Owen. You know what I mean? Just to point me, yeah.
Greg, you're not the only one who needs it, because Ryanair went into Belfast International, pulled out, big row. Michael O'Leary famously called it Lough Neagh International Airport. He heaped abuse and vitriol on top of Belfast International. Then, after about a year and a half, he'd a row at Belfast City, went back to Belfast International. But he's flying out of Belfast International. Aer Lingus are flying out of Belfast City. That's how it stands. Yeah. And the EasyJet, the only airport in Ireland where Ryanair go head-to-head with EasyJet is Belfast International. So it will be an interesting summer, and it could lead to very good fares out of Belfast International, because Ryanair don't have the same level of competition in other airports.
And part of the problem with me too is I'm just not in airports as as often as I would like. Oh, and listen, it's always
why leave Carrickfinn, Greg? Why would you ever want to leave Carrickfinn?
Yes, but I don't fly. I just sit watching airplanes. Listen, thanks very much, Eoghan. That's Eoghan Corry there, editor of The Air and Travel magazine.